Friday night. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ernie Anastos. Thank you very much for joining us. It has been a very busy news day, and tonight we start with the Russia investigation. New indictments of more than a dozen Russians for meddling in our elections. Linda Schmidt has more now on what was really a long-term plan and more developments to boot. Yes.
A lot going on here tonight, Ernie. Well, Robert Mueller's office says the goal of a Russian plot was to get Americans to distrust our political candidates as well as our entire political process. Well, now 13 Russian nationals and 3 Russian companies have been criminally charged.
The defendants allegedly conducted what they called information warfare against the United States.
Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein laid out the criminal charges brought by Special Counsel Robert Mueller in his investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 election. He says the plot began back in 2014 and was funded by a Russian businessman with close ties to Putin. That businessman has been indicted along with 12 other Russian nationals and 3 Russian companies.
2 of the defendants allegedly traveled to the United States in 2014 to collect intelligence for their American influence operations.
The indictment alleges the Russian defendants created phony identities online and using social media such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, started their sophisticated campaign to sway public opinion in the United States in favor of Donald Trump and against Hillary Clinton.
The defendants took extraordinary steps to make it appear that they were ordinary American political activists.
The charges say the Russians also communicated with members of Trump's campaign who thought they were dealing with Americans.
The defendants posed as politically and socially active Americans, advocating for and against particular candidates. The Americans did not know that they were communicating with Russians.
Although Robert Mueller's investigation is not over, President Trump and his campaign have always maintained they did not collude with the Russians.
Now, there is no allegation in this indictment that any American was a knowing participant in this illegal activity.
The president did not speak with reporters when leaving Washington this afternoon for Mar-a-Lago. Instead, he tweeted, "Russia started their anti-U.S. campaign in 2014, long before I announced that I would run for president. The results of the election were not impacted. The Trump campaign did nothing wrong. No collusion." And that tweet, by the way, is the very first time President Trump has ever acknowledged that the Russians actually launched a campaign against the U.S. and was trying to hurt us. Ernie, back over to you.
All right, Linda, thank you very much for that. Joining me right now to talk more about this is Bob Bianchi, who is a distinguished attorney, former head Morris County prosecutor. Thanks for being here tonight.
Sure.
We've been following the story. This was well-funded, well-programmed, well-designed, you know, to get involved in our elections. But the Russians are known for this. They've been involved in politics worldwide. But why this particular election? What was at stake here in the U.S.?
I think there was a confluence of a number of different things. 4 years before that, social media platforms and outreach to people wasn't quite as robust, and they were trying it in different countries, and it was successful. So I think that they wanted to go for the big game here in the 2000, election, presidential election, and they did. And they also, I think, had a motive to do it as well. They had a really significant reason. First of all, they were trying to create dissension. I think is their primary reason. It's clear in the indictment. They want to depreciate our democracy, have us question our elections, question our institutions and our freedom, and that obviously worked. I mean, our friends on Facebook, people arguing with one another from all this disinformation. And also, when you get down to the bottom line of the Trump versus Clinton scenario, so Hillary Clinton is known as a hawk and pretty much hold Russia to the sanctions person. And Donald Trump was out there, right or wrong, I'm not critiquing it, saying, why can't we have a better relationship with the Russians? And can you get me the emails? So they had a person that they knew was sympathetic.
You've had a lot of experience in politics and elections and so forth. Have you ever seen this type of interference before?
No. In the cases that I handled as the head prosecutor, most of the political corruption cases would involve campaign finance, things where in-kind contributions aren't being reported, some criminality associated with it. But
not like this.
The texture of this was quite amazing because they got into the American psyche and started pitting groups against one another. Sometimes they even did rallies in favor of Trump, rallies against Trump in order to create tension.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens now. If these Russians are extradited here to the United States, what kind of cooperation we might see from Putin.
Well, I think that this is the big political question, Ernie. Great question. One, will Donald Trump finally and the Congress put the sanctions back, even make them more robust than they were before in the Obama administration? That's the first political question. The second one is, will he go to Vladimir Putin, who he's been very close with and supposedly is establishing a relationship, and say, my friend, now is the time to bring those people that try to compromise our democracy, compromise our elections, we want them extradited back to the United States.
All eyes will be on that. And also more to come with the Bob Mueller investigation, too. That's going to continue.
Absolutely. Listen, Rod Rosenstein was very, very careful in his language. It was very siloed, we would call it language. In this indictment, there's unwitting Americans. I would have no question about the fact, Ernie, that the Russians got to other Americans through use of financial, incentives, as well as the obstruction case that's still going on at the same time. This is far from over.
Okay, Bob Bianchi, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
You got it, Ernie.
More to come. All right.